I want to talk a little bit about food and relationships. Recently, I've been watching a lot of the threads that have been happening on giveittomeraw.com, which is our community website for people who want to learn about raw foods and meet other people who are also bringing consciousness to their diet. And some of the threads, well, a lot of the threads have been focusing on some of the challenges that people have around acceptance and around raw food related to social aspects of life. So I'm going to cover that topic in a couple of series of videos, but this first topic is going to relate specifically to how food, when we first start to bring the more conscious food elements into our dietary regimen, how it affects the relationships around us. And I'm going to do that by telling a couple of stories that have gone on in my life, as well as some teachings and some insight that I've developed over the years, now 7 years eating this way and living this way. So first off, I want to tell a story about how my food journey started. And that was actually at a conference held by an organization called YJA. It's a conference about spirituality and ahimsa, things like that. And one of the keynote speakers at the conference was the president of PETA, Ingrid Newkirk, I believe her name is. And she was talking about the challenges that cows and other animals face, and specifically about how non-compassionate of food milk is, and all the suffering that specifically the cows and their calves face when the milk is being extracted for them. And I really wasn't into that back then, meaning that I wasn't really at a place and a personal level of consciousness where I could really understand how those things affected me and others. But she did say something that resonated with me, which was that if individuals are suffering from acne or allergies, and I was suffering from acne, if they remove milk and dairy from their diet, they could significantly see it improve, their acne improve, or completely go away. And at that time, it was the year 2000, I was experiencing a lot of acne challenges. My skin was very oily, and I just didn't really like the way that I looked and felt. So I removed milk out of my diet. I decided that day that I wanted to remove milk out of my diet. And interesting thing was, right around that time, I was also dating a girl from California, and it was a long-distance relationship. And when I told her that I had embarked on this journey of removing milk out of my diet, and I had been reading all these books, and I was interested in going vegan, she got really quiet the first time that I told her on the phone. And you could tell that something was unsettling, although back then I didn't really know what it was. And progressively over the next couple of weeks, till we finally ended up kind of splitting apart and breaking up, she got progressively more quiet and kind of distant, and really started to feel like, we weren't a match anymore, that we weren't headed in a positive direction. Many years down the road, a few years down the road, and after a few conversations with her, we're still friends, I was able to understand that, the biggest concern that she has was the fact that she was losing me, that I was embarking on this journey, and here I am, food, which is such a fundamental way that people relate to the world, I was changing my relationship with that. And we had already been dealing with a long-distance relationship, and on top of that, I was throwing this food element on top of her. Her basic questions were, what are we going to eat when we go out? If we meet up and we want to go out on a date, what are we going to do? What are we going to eat? If something would progress in the future, I was young then, I was only 18 years old, but let's say something progressed in the future, we decided to start a family, what would our kids eat? How would we raise them? This is really weird. And what that kind of led me to believe is that yes, those were legitimate concerns. Of course, people have the fear of losing you. But on a larger aspect, what I learned is that whatever your relationship is with somebody before you really start to bring more conscious elements of food into it, that relationship will get amplified. And it's not just about food choices, and I'll make it really sort of clear and specific. Anytime you do something in your life that's different, that even if you're doing it to empower yourself, to better yourself, to improve your life, to improve your health, the close people around you, if they feel that they're going to lose you, or if they feel that it's different enough that they don't fit in or they don't understand it, whatever your relationship is with them will be amplified. And what I mean by that is that, let's take another aspect of that. My dad has been one of the biggest supporters, the biggest supporter in my life to date. And when he first heard about my journey and switching around this, our relationship had always been solid. Our relationship was built on authenticity, on trust, on a deep sense of love that comes from seeing the other person as you see themselves. And growing up, my dad had always been my best friend. So when he heard about my journey, although that wasn't something that spoke to him at that time, he used it as an opportunity to get closer to me. He wanted to ask questions. Why did I want to do the things that I wanted to do? Now, naturally, being my dad, he was concerned and wanted to make sure that I was making the right choices overall, that I wasn't going to embark on something that I was just like, oh yeah, vegan, that sounds great. Let me just jump into it without even thinking about what I was going to eat. I didn't know how to make food back then. I didn't know about nutritional aspects of food. So he had some legitimate concerns, but our relationship was solid. So it continued to grow solidly amongst this personal growth that I was experiencing. And some other relationships that I had in my life, this past girlfriend, as well as some other friends and family members I had around with me, my relationship with them wasn't solid. It wasn't a relationship that was built on true love and understanding, which is seeing the other person as you see yourself. It was a relationship that was sort of more surface level. We kind of dealt with each other. And so when I embarked on this journey, naturally what ended up happening is that out of fear of losing me, out of fear of questioning their own life, a lot of individuals, became very challenging. And so my world showed up initially when I started changing my dietary habits. It showed up in a way that it was very challenging socially. I had to worry so much about what I was going to eat. A year later, I started eating more raw foods into my diet after I met Nature Love. I started worrying about just the most basic things. What will people think about me? How will I explain it to them? What will go on? And I noticed, just like we talked in the last post, is that my relationship again first I noticed that my relationship became amplified what it was already. If I had a great relationship, perfect. If I had a challenging relationship, that would show up even further. But along with that, I also realized that wherever I was internally, wherever I felt internally about what I was doing would project outwards as well too, and that's how people ended up treating me. So in the last post about falling still, I said that falling still is the best way to align your inner world so that it manifests into your outer world. Well, at that time, not knowing about that practice or many other things, my inner world was in a state of chaos, uncertainty, doubt, and that's natural, that's fine when you're starting something new. But what ended up happening is that I would project that outward. And so because I had this uncertainty and because I was like, well, I don't know really what I'm doing and I don't know if I'll be accepted. I don't know how people will think about this. I don't know if people will think I'm crazy. Naturally, I ended up manifesting that externally because other individuals, especially people who are unconscious or people that had a lot of layers that were stacked up amongst their true self, they would sense that emotion and use it as an opportunity to kind of prod into it a little bit deeper. So if I was at a wedding, if I was meeting somebody for the first time, I would go through these experiences that ended up being very uncomfortable for me. And I used to think that the answers were on a practical level. What do I have to say to somebody to have them get and understand what I'm doing? But then a few years later on, something really interesting happened. Right around about 2 years into me eating a primary raw foods diet, I let go of needing anybody else to feel any particular way about both the way that I ate and the way that I lived. And instantaneously, almost overnight, what I started to see is that people treated me differently. People approached from a sense of curiosity. And if there were some prodding questions or individuals who just kind of were looking for a little bit of some fun or a little fight, a little dialogue or discussion, many of my family members are doctors. So when they heard what I was doing, they were like, this isn't safe, this isn't sound. But those same people a couple years later on the road who hadn't seen since the original time that I had switched my diet, they just would sense something different about me. They would sense a different piece that I had towards the way that I ate, the way that I lived, and they would ask in a more curious way, in a more interested way, rather than looking for a place of fight, because I felt internally peaceful, so naturally that projected outwards as well too. So why I bring that up is that when most people think about their dietary habits, their way of living. It could be anything. You could be really into fitness and exercise, and you could be really into acting, and you decide that you want to spend a lot of your time devoting and kind of working on that trade. And then because you're not hanging out with your friends late at night on the weekends, because you're focusing on reading or maybe whatever else you're doing, you may feel that they may feel that you're distancing yourself from them. It doesn't matter what you're doing in life. Anytime you embark on something that might be benefiting yourself, people will treat you how you perceive yourself.